Imagine having the world at your feet, only to realize you're standing on a trapdoor. Julian Vane wasn't just a billionaire, he was a grandmaster of the long game. For 3 years, his marriage to Serafina was the talk of Manhattan, a union of old money and tech gold. But behind the closed doors of their glass and steel penthouse, the air was toxic. Serafina didn't just want Julian's name, she wanted to erase his past. Specifically, she wanted to erase Elena and the boy who carried the Vane legacy in his veins. Julian played the part of the indifferent husband perfectly, letting Serafina believe she was the one pulling the strings, while he quietly waited for her to weave her own noose. Serafina spent her mornings curating a life of perfection, but her afternoons were dedicated to a darker craft, psychological warfare. She would call Elena just to remind her of her place, sending gifts for Leo that were backhanded insults, cheap toys meant to signify his lowly status. Elena took it all with a silent grace that infuriated Serafina. Julian watched these interactions through a digital veil, his expression unreadable as he monitored the escalating vitriol. He knew that a woman like Serafina wouldn't stop at words. She needed a spectacle. She needed to destroy Elena in front of the world to feel truly secure in her stolen throne. The Vane Autumn Gala was approaching, the pinnacle of the social season in New York. As Serafina stepped into her walk-in closet, she looked at a $20,000 gown and saw a battle uniform. She wasn't just planning a party, she was planning an execution. Little did she know, the invitation she sent to Elena wasn't a gesture of pity, but the final piece of Julian's puzzle. He stood at the window, watching the city lights, knowing that by the time the sun rose after the gala, his life would be irrevocably changed. The question wasn't if Serafina would strike, but how far she would go to seal her own fate. The grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel was a sea of silk and champagne, but the atmosphere felt electric, like a storm about to break. Elena arrived in a simple, off-the-rack black dress, looking like a dove in a cage of peacocks. She was only there because Julian had sent a private note, one she couldn't ignore. Serafina spotted her instantly, her eyes narrowing like a predator seeing movement in the tall grass. The elite whispered as Elena moved through the crowd, their judgments hanging heavy in the air. Serafina waited until the cameras were flashing and the most influential eyes in the city were turned toward the center of the room before she made her move. With a flick of her wrist, Serafina stumbled. It was a masterpiece of physical acting. She collided with the waiter, sending a tray of red wine and crystal flutes directly onto Elena. The crash echoed through the silent room. Elena stood drenched, the dark liquid staining her dress like a wound, but she didn't scream. She didn't even flinch. Serafina's voice cut through the silence, loud and shrill, accusing Elena of being a clumsy social climber who was using a bastard child to worm her way into a world where she didn't belong. The hum of gossip turned into a roar of condemnation. But Serafina wasn't done. As helpfully as a snake offering a hand, she reached out to steady Elena, and in that split second of feigned concern, she slipped a 3-carat diamond brooch into Elena's open clutch. "Security!" Serafina cried, her voice dripping with fake distress. "My heirloom. She's taken it." The guards closed in, and the crowd pressed forward to witness the fall of the girl who dared to love a Vane. Up on the mezzanine, Julian leaned against the gold railing, his face a mask of stone. He didn't move to help. He simply tapped a single button on his phone. Is this the moment Elena loses everything, or is it the moment Serafina's world begins to burn? The city was just beginning to stir when Serafina awoke, a smug smile playing on her lips. She stretched languidly in the vast, silk-sheeted bed, anticipating the morning headlines screaming about Elena's public disgrace and supposed theft. It was a victory, perfectly executed. She pictured Elena cowering somewhere, her reputation in tatters, finally out of their lives for good. Serafina's first thought was a celebratory spa day, a reward for her masterful performance. She reached for her designer wallet, pulling out a sleek black card, only for it to be declined. A momentary flicker of annoyance, she chalked it up to a glitch. But then another card, and another, all met with the same humiliating rejection. The house, usually bustling with staff, was eerily quiet, the silence more unsettling than any noise. A knot of unease began to tighten in Serafina's stomach. This wasn't right. Julian's office, a glass-walled sanctuary on the top floor, was her next stop. She expected to find him engrossed in his usual morning routine, perhaps reading financial reports, oblivious to her minor inconvenience. But what she saw stopped her cold in the doorway. Julian was there, yes, but he wasn't alone. Sitting opposite him, in a chair usually reserved for high-powered executives, was Elena. But this wasn't the same Elena from the gala. Gone was the stained black dress, replaced by a sharp, tailored navy suit that exuded quiet confidence. Her hair was pulled back elegantly, and her eyes, though still soft, held a new, steely resolve. She looked every bit the partner Julian had once cherished. Julian looked up as Serafina burst in, his cold blue eyes meeting hers without a flicker of surprise or warmth. "Serafina," he stated, his voice devoid of emotion. "We need to talk." Elena remained silent, her gaze fixed on Serafina with a quiet intensity that spoke volumes. The air in the room was thick with unspoken tension, a stark contrast to the previous night's chaos. Serafina glanced between Julian and Elena, a sickening realization dawning on her. This wasn't about a minor credit card issue. This wasn't even about Elena's presence. This was about power, and in that moment, Serafina felt it slipping through her fingers like sand. Had her perfect victory been nothing but a prelude to her own downfall? Julian didn't mince words. He held up a sleek tablet, displaying a document with complex legal jargon. "Our prenuptial agreement, Serafina," he began, his voice flat. "Specifically, the social conduct and morality clause." Serafina scoffed, a nervous laugh escaping her. She'd signed it without truly reading the fine print, confident in her ability to manipulate Julian. But as Julian scrolled, outlining the clauses designed to protect his heir, Leo, and his heir's mother, Elena, from reputational damage, her confidence began to crumble. He then played the first video, a crystal-clear, high-definition shot from 4 different angles showing Serafina's accidental trip, the wine spill, and her theatrical accusations. The air grew heavy as Julian, with surgical precision, continued. He fast-forwarded to the crucial moment, Serafina's hand, unmistakably, slipping the diamond brooch into Elena's clutch. The evidence was irrefutable, undeniable. Serafina watched, her face draining of color, seeing her meticulously planned triumph unravel before her eyes. The clause, Julian explained, stipulated that any documented act of harassment or defamation against his bloodline or their direct protector triggered an automatic, at-fault divorce. Her public spectacle at the gala wasn't a victory, it was the mechanism Julian had designed to dismantle their marriage on his terms. Every grand gesture, every cruel word, every calculated move she had made was now a weapon turned against her. The agreement also states, Julian continued, his voice cutting through the stunned silence, that in the event of an at-fault divorce, due to documented harassment against my bloodline, you forfeit your $50 million settlement. The words hit Serafina like a physical blow. The millions she had counted on, the security she had believed was hers, vanished into thin air. Her carefully constructed world was collapsing. Elena watched, her expression unreadable, as Serafina's carefully cultivated facade cracked. Julian leaned back, finally allowing a hint of something, not triumph, but a chilling satisfaction, to cross his features. Serafina had been so focused on destroying Elena that she hadn't seen the cage Julian had been building around her. The financial blow was just the beginning. Julian was about to strip away the only thing Serafina valued more than money, her reputation. As she stood trembling in the office, Julian calmly turned his laptop screen toward her. He wasn't looking at bank statements anymore. He was looking at a send confirmation on a mass email. "I've taken the liberty of sharing the raw gala footage with the board members of every charity you chair," he said, his voice as sharp as a scalpel. "The museum, the children's hospital, the opera house. They now have a front-row seat to your performance of planting that brooch." Serafina felt the air leave the room. In her world, A scandal of this magnitude, framed by the cold, hard evidence of a security camera, was a death sentence. By noon, her phone began to vibrate incessantly with notifications. It wasn't friends checking in, it was formal resignations from her committees and uninvites from the season's most exclusive events. She was being erased from the social fabric of the city in real time. Elena, who had endured Serafina's vitriol for years, finally stood up. She didn't gloat. She simply walked over to Julian, and for the first time, he reached out and took her hand, a public declaration of an alliance that had never truly died. The realization hit Serafina like a physical weight. Julian hadn't just protected Elena, he had been using Serafina as a high society shield. He needed a wife to keep the prying eyes of the press away while he quietly built a fortress for his real family. Serafina was never the partner. She was the distraction. "The cars are packed, Serafina," Julian said, standing up to signify the end of the meeting. "Your personal belongings have been sent to a storage unit. I've already paid for the first month. After that, you're on your own." The power dynamic hadn't just shifted, it had been completely obliterated. The finality of the situation didn't truly sink in until Serafina was standing in the marble foyer, flanked by the same security guards she had bossed around just 12 hours prior. They didn't look at her with fear or respect anymore. They looked at her with the cold indifference one shows to a trespassing stranger. She clutched her designer handbag, now empty of Julian's credit cards, and walked toward the massive iron gates of the Vane estate. Outside, the world felt vastly different. There was no chauffeur waiting, no paparazzi vying for her photo, just the hum of a city that had already moved on to the next scandal. As the heavy gates clicked shut with a metallic finality, Serafina turned back to see the penthouse windows reflecting the afternoon sun. She saw two figures on the balcony, Julian and Elena, with little Leo between them. They looked like the perfect family, the one she had tried so hard to dismantle. In her pursuit of total control, she had ignored the most basic rule of the game. Never underestimate a man who has everything to lose. She had played the role of the villain so well that she had forgotten Julian was the one writing the script. Now, she was just a footnote in his success story. Standing on the sidewalk, the billionaire's ex-wife realized the true depth of her regret. It wasn't just about the lost fortune or the lost status. It was the realization that she had been outplayed by a man she thought she had mastered. Julian had waited 3 years for her to make a mistake big enough to destroy her, and she had handed it to him on a silver platter. As she began to walk toward the subway, a place she hadn't stepped foot in for a decade, the weight of her new reality settled in. The glitch wasn't Elena. The glitch was her, and Julian had finally hit delete.